Hello, everybody. I'm Ed Brown, and this is the 15th of September in 2018. And the subject of this little discussion is baseball in Beverly. Now, baseball, I have to say, is far and away my favorite sport. Others don't agree, but I love baseball. But before we get into the local connections, it's probably a good idea to go back a little bit and spend a couple of minutes talking about the history of baseball. Now, games played with stick and ball can be traced back to the 1700s. In fact, there was a children's primer book that was published in England in 1744 and then reprinted in the United States under the title of B is for Baseball. The ball once struck off, away flies the boy to the next destined post and then home with joy. I guess we can recognize it. The post refers to is that in the early days, bases were marked by wooden stakes driven into the ground. And on the Lewis and Clark expedition, when they left St. Louis and went up the Missouri River and then on across the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific Ocean. On the way back in the spring of 1806, they stopped for a while to visit their friends, the Nez Perce Indians, who had saved them when they stumbled starving out of the Bitterroot Mountains on the way heading west. And Meriwether Lewis recorded in his journal that the men spent part of the day teaching the Indians a new game called base. And there's a woodcut in existence that was made in 1834 showing boys playing a game with a bat and ball on the Boston Common. These games were known by different names, and the rules they varied really from place to place. But baseball as we know it, now I don't want to hear anything about Abner Doubleday. That myth has gone on far too long, and there's no truth to it. Even today on the Red Sox radio broadcast, every now and then something unusual happens and Joe Castiglione will say, "Old Abner has done it again." But that myth came about in 1907. The commissioners of baseball, who at that time consisted of the president of the American League, the president of the National League, and a third commissioner who was agreed upon by the two of them. There had been a lot of discussion about baseball really not being an American game. There's just an American adaptation of the Old English game of rounders. So they appointed this Mills Commission to look into the matter and come up with some proof that baseball really is an American game. Well, along came an old man named Abner Graves, who told them a rather meandering story. He claimed that when he was a boy in Cooperstown, New York in 1839, his friend Abner Doubleday improved town ball by drawing up a whole new set of rules, which were used for the first time when two local schools played each other. Well, the Mills Commission jumped all over this. That's just what they wanted to hear. Here's an American Civil War general who actually invented the game. So they just swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. If they bothered to do some checking, they would have realized the story was ridiculous, because in 1839, Abner Graves was nowhere near Cooperstown, New York. He was a cadet at West Point. And Abner Doubleday, there's no evidence that he ever played a baseball game or even saw a baseball game. Yet in later years, when the game had become wildly popular in the United States during his lifetime, he never wrote anything about it or claimed any connection with it. And when he died in 1892, I believe it was, his obituary didn't mention baseball. So they just jumped on this story and turned in the report that baseball had been invented by Abner Doubleday in 1839 in Cooperstown, New York. And so when the Baseball Hall of Fame was dedicated in 1939 on the supposed anniversary, I mean, where did they put it? Cooperstown, of course. That baseball was a small town invention. This is where it came out of. Now, where does the truth lie? Small town America? No. It actually came out of, I hate to say it, but it's true, the home of Mickey Mantle and Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth and Yogi Berra and Bucky Bleeping Dent, New York City. And it can positively be traced to the year 1845. And a man primarily responsible, his name was Alexander Joy Cartwright. He was born in 1820, and he was an athletic young man. He was a clerk in one of the New York banks, a cashier, I believe, and he also was a member of one of the companies that fought fires in New York City back in the early 1840s. And he and some of his friends liked to keep in shape by playing ball on Murray Hill. And they were using some sort of, the old town ball rules. But Cartwright decided that this could be very well improved upon. So in the spring of 1845, he showed up with a diagram and a set of rules in hand that he'd worked on. And he decided that the field should be 4 bases, 30 paces, or 90 feet apart. And that anything hit outside the lines of that field would be a foul ball. Before that, anything that was hit in any direction was fair. And he decided that there would be 9 players on a side, there would be 3 outfielders, and 1 infielder at each station near each base. And to balance off the infield, there'd be a 4th infielder who he called the shortstop. And there would be a thrower who would stand 45 feet from the home base or home plate to throw the ball to the batter. And of course, they'd have to be somebody stationed behind the plate to catch the missed pitches or the wide pitches. And these 9 players would bat in a prescribed order throughout the game. That before that, everybody batted in every inning. And rather than having everybody bat in every inning, he proposed a rule saying 3 out, all out. So once 3 players were retired, then the teams would change sides. So they tried it out, and they liked it very much. So they decided, well, we're going to why don't we form a club? We'll call it the Knickerbocker Baseball Club. So they formed that officially in September of '45, and they rented a meeting room in Fijux's Hotel, and they also leased playing space across the Hudson in Jersey, in Hoboken, the Elysian Fields, which they would use for their playing area. So twice a week they would board the Berkeley Street ferry and ride over the Hudson to Hoboken and choose up sides and play ball. And they also picked what they called first nine, their better players, who they could use to play against other clubs. And so the first real baseball game under the new rules, the Knickerbocker-Cartwright rules, was played in June of 1846 at the Elysian Fields between the Knickerbockers and the